2025 isn't letting up when it comes to video game releases, with so many big hitters vying for our attention. However, within the likes of GTA 6 and Ghost of Yotei are the overlooked but just as promising titles that should be on your radar. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 8 overlooked games that could surprise us in 2025. Number 8, Dying Light: The Beast. Truth be told, I was a little bit disappointed with Dying Light 2. Though exceedingly ambitious, it perhaps bit off more than it could chew, expanding out a focused zombie-killing, parkour-infused open-world game into a full-on RPG with factions, decisions, and tens of hours worth of content to indulge in. Of course, that sounds like a promising transition on paper, but in practice it made the sequel a little bit of a bloated mess, lacking the sharp edge of that first game. In lieu of a Dying Light 3 then, we're first getting The Beast, a self-contained sidequel that brings back the protagonist of the first game who, if you can't remember, ended up himself succumbing to the zombie infection in that title's DLC. This game picks up a decade later after he spent that time as a lab rat. What that means for gameplay changes is a much larger emphasis on those beast powers gained from the infection that we saw in Dying Light 2, with more superhuman abilities being added to your arsenal alongside the regular agile melee combat that players have come to expect from this series. With a shorter, more focused runtime and the return of a fan-favourite character, The Beast definitely shouldn't be overlooked for not being a proper sequel. Number 7. Marvel 1943: Rise of Hydra. While probably the most well-known game on this list, it's still kinda crazy how under the radar Marvel 1943: Rise of Hydra is flying. Despite boasting 2 of the biggest Marvel superheroes in Captain America and Black Panther, and being the grand return for original Uncharted helmet Amy Hennig, you would be forgiven for forgetting that Rise of Hydra was even slated for this year. That's perhaps down to the game itself receiving minimal marketing so far, including an announcement trailer that feels like it happened a lifetime ago. But what a trailer that was! Boasting absolutely incredible facial animation and fidelity, this story-driven action-adventure looks far and away from the kinds of superhero adaptations that we used to get a few generations ago. Its bold premise sees players take control of 4 heroes, the aforementioned duo as well as a Howling Commando and a Wakandan agent, fighting against fascism in World War II Paris. And as far as elevator pitches go, I think you can do far worse than that. Again, we've not seen much in the way of gameplay, but there's a lot of potential here, if only because the premise gives us the Saboteur vibes. And it'll be interesting who else from across the Marvel Universe might show up to take part. Number 6, Pathologic 3. Alright, here's one for the sickos in the audience. Pathologic 3 was announced last year and came as a surprise, not least because Pathologic 2 was seemingly still unfinished. The second title was awaiting the announced arrival of a second playable character and a whole new twist on the narrative, which ultimately has taken the form of a genuine sequel. But wait, I hear you all asking, what the hell is Pathologic 2 or Pathologic 1? Well, if you haven't played it or watched H. Bomber Guy's excellent Pathologic is Genius and Here's Why video, it's the follow-up to a hardcore cult classic first-person survival RPG, where you control a character who rocks up to a town ravaged by the plague. It's your job to figure out a way to stop the spread, racing against the clock to play politics while making tough choices that will inevitably not work out well for everyone. It's a punishing game, but intentionally so, and the quality of the writing, the ambition of its magical realist environment, and characters makes it one of the most unique series running today. Pathologic 3 looks to take that ambition one step further with a time-bending mechanic that will no doubt confuse players who finally thought they had a handle on everything after 2 games. If you like your horror and you like your experimental meta-narratives, then this sequel and the whole series should be on your radar. Number 5, Post-Trauma. Horror fans have been blessed with titles recently. The old masters like Silent Hill and Resident Evil have blended the old and new with remakes of beloved titles, but it is understandable to still pine for a time of fixed camera angles, puzzle solving, and being lost inside an eerie environment. environment? Well, enter post-trauma, a new horror game inverting the blend of old and new that we've come to take as standard. Where something like Resident Evil 2 brings an older structure and adapts it to suit modern third-person shooting conventions, post-trauma is bringing back the older style of gameplay and then putting a fresh coat of paint on it. Heavily reminiscent of Silent Hill's rust and concrete aesthetic, here you jump into the shoes of a regular guy who has to figure out what the hell has happened to the world around him. Promising unforgiving gameplay that won't hold your hand and a mysterious story tying everything together, post-trauma is for people who wish that Konami just whacked 4K graphics on the original Silent Hill 2 and released it on modern consoles. Number 4, The Sinking City 2. The second Lovecraftian game on this list, The Sinking City sees players occupy the role of a detective exploring a series of grisly murders in a city that's been partially submerged by a flood and is crawling with strange fishmen. It kind of just sounds like a night out in Newcastle to me, but honestly, by Lovecraft standards, that is a pretty vanilla premise. Though the original game had its many issues and wasn't exactly a home run that you'd recommend to everyone, it did have plenty to enjoy. The detective gameplay was satisfying in bursts as you analysed crime scenes, interviewed suspects, and used your noodle to chase down leads. It struck a nice balance between giving you those light bulb moments without leaving you completely lost, making for a fun rather than frustrating experience. The grander story as well was surprisingly deep, with standout twists and character moments that served to tie the sometimes disparate cases together. This sequel, though, as recently announced via a Kickstarter, is going in a bit of a different direction. Instead of detective work being the drive and thrust, this time it's a good old-fashioned emphasis on survival horror that takes center stage. A switch to Unreal Engine 5 makes it look far better than the original as well, and hopefully a more focused horror approach will put the first effort in its shadow. Number 3, Ritual Tides. Not too much is currently known about Ritual Tides. Announced last Halloween, this first-person horror title is the debut game from new studio Verpaint Games, a team comprised of industry veterans that are attempting to make, and I quote, the best-looking game of 2025. Now, I was fortunate enough to get a chance to interview the team last year, and despite my own reservations, I did come out convinced by the vision. Ritual Tides promises to be an unrelenting Lovecraftian experience that grounds the unknowable cosmic horror of the genre master's work in a terrifying tale that investigates humanity's capacity for evil. Taking place on a fictional English island in the 1800s, the player's job is to explore a mysterious town, figure out why they're there, and avoid being brutally murdered by a plethora of unique Lovecraftian creatures. With an emphasis on delivering a focused first-person experience dripping with secrets, Ritual Tides ticks all the right boxes on paper, so let's just hope the execution is as good as the pitch when it drops later this year. Number 2, Ninja Gaiden 4. After years and years of waiting, my dream of a Ninja Gaiden 4 announcement finally came true early in 2025. Surprisingly announced by Xbox, and yes, it is launching day one on Game Pass, the long-awaited revival of the hack-and-slash franchise sees original developer Team Ninja teaming up with action game masters Platinum Games. I feel like I could kind of stop the entry there because that just sounds promising enough, but I guess I'll tell you a bit more. Taking a page out of another action franchise's book, NG4 introduces a new, younger protagonist in addition to series staple Ryu Hayabusa, each with their own abilities and fighting styles. While a lot of the old moves look to be returning, the player's going to have more options at their disposal this time around, with a larger emphasis on vertical acrobatics and using wall runs and grappling hooks to blitz around larger levels. There are some worries, of course. I mean, the franchise has been dormant so long, and aesthetically, the clinical, clean areas do look a far cry away from some of the more memorable stages in the original series, but what we've seen so far does look solid, and the track record of the developers, well, it speaks for itself. Number 1, RoboCop Unfinished Business. Announced literally last night at the time of recording, I hastily rewrote this list to make sure that RoboCop Unfinished Business got a shout out. Why? Well, because the original game, 2023's RoboCop Rogue City, was a genuine delight. Though previews made the adaptation look a little janky, a little dodgy, a little classic licensed game cash-in, the end product was anything but. Instead, it was an engaging first-person romp, lovingly capturing the hallmarks of the IP that promised even better things to come now that the devs had found their footing. And it looks like those things to come are finally here with RoboCop Unfinished Business, a new standalone follow-up that takes the original blueprint and takes a little inspiration from another dystopian cyberpunk series, Judge Dredd, by setting the action within the confines of one crime-infested tower block. It's a setup that action movies have used to great success for years, and hopefully Unfinished Business can capture that same magic when it drops later this year.